Hey guys, I hope everybody's having a fantastic day. Whether you're watching this in the morning, in the afternoon, or in the evening, I'm glad you're all here. Today I wanted to go through and do a little different video and talk about lock types and the different lock types in my collection and run through them and give you kind of my overall thoughts on lock types. Before I get started, I do want to say thank you to all the channel members. You guys mean the world to me, and I appreciate everything you do for the channel. And I want to thank just anybody who comes in, who watches the content, who comes back, who subscribes, who likes the content, and all the normal stuff. Or if you just come by to watch content, thank you. So when we talk about lock types, you go back, and again, this is by no means going to be historically accurate. This is just me kind of surmising, going through my pontification of kind of the evolution of the pocket knife. And it also kind of ties into my philosophy about a locking knife and how much confidence do I need to put into that knife, which is a lot, but I also need to put common sense into what its capabilities are. So we started out with slip joint knives. Before that, fixed blades, of course, but these are folding knives that have spring tension that by no means lock them, but if you use them with care and you use them for a task that's not too hard use, they work fine. But they're not a locking knife. They're a slip joint, but the spring keeps it from being a floppy knife and keeps it kind of gives it resistance. And then you've got knives like this GEC that's got an insanely tough pull, but this is an older recreation of an early liner lock model. So this has got the same half stop as a slip joint, but it has this thin liner that pushes out of the way, not like a modern liner lock, but it does give the knife a little bit more stability in how it locks up, right? So fast forward to when I kind of got into the knife game, and this is an old knife of mine. This is a Buck 110, which was the type of lock that we're going to start talking about today, kind of a backlock. So this is kind of like an evolution of a slip joint, but instead of having the ability to close it with tension, you have to push on this back little lever here that raises this spring, releasing the blade and allowing you to close the lock. Then again, when it's open, that snaps into place under pressure and that lock's not going anywhere, right? So again, I don't spine whack a lot of knives just because I don't use a lot of knives backwards, and I don't hard use knives to where I'm going to rear back and hit something with the back of the blade, and I'm always respectful of it's not a fixed blade. So I think the backlock and all these locks that we're going to look at, some of course more stable than others, are all going to be great ample locking mechanisms. So let's start out by looking at just a couple of modern, what I consider just a backlock. So we've got the American Lawman, which if I'm not mistaken is not a Triad Lock. This is just a standard backlock knife. And then you've got the Spyderco Dragonfly. Again, another backlock knife. Not really fancy, but both of them very, very, very stable, very solid lockups. And then to deploy them, you just simply push that lock bar up, which releases the knife, just like the old Buck. And these guys will fall home. And then you've got the backlock knife. An older knife that was one of my first knives that I kind of equate with another lock style that is from a newer knife, the Manx, is a ball lock. And this isn't an exact replication of a ball lock, but it's similar. This is an old Kershaw Onion. And when you deploy this knife, it's got the speed assist, but you've got this spring actuated ball bearing that actually pushes the thumb stud back into the blade stop and then locking up the blade. So to release it, you simply push that forward. It's under tension there. Speed safe, close it up, open it. That's what's locking it right there, that ball, which is different. I'm going to get this out of frame. but it uses a similar mechanism of travel. Of course, it's a totally different way that this ball cage and this ball work, but you're still dealing with a vertical spring, kind of like the ram lock, which I could have brought out here, my Microtech, but I wanted to keep it to 2 or 3 knives for each lock type, so this video didn't go on forever. But the Manx 2 uses Spyderco's version of a ball lock, where you've got this spring that's vertically under pressure here. So as this rotates forward, you've got this area here where this titanium, it was plastic to start with, I put a titanium one in, slides in with this ball bearing and locks in like an absolute vault. This lock is very, very stable. Again, it's not as stable as a fixed blade, but it's as stable as I'm going to need if I'm going to pay attention to what I'm doing. So the ball lock, those were kind of 2 different variations of ball locks. But I do consider them both ball locks because I've taken them both apart and the mechanisms are similar. So from there we move on to kind of a unique knife. And I think I've got 2 knives in the house that might fit the description of the knife I'm trying to describe here. This is a Spyderco Smock, and as we all know, it uses a compression lock, which is really a top liner lock, with a button that you push instead of the compression lock, which we'll come to soon, instead of reaching in and having to hit your compression to push the scale out of the way, the liner. So you simply just push the button and the liner falls short. I unboxed a knife today that a buddy of mine, A to Z EDC, let me borrow that I think improves on this lock in a lot of different ways, and I've just started to try it out. But this is the Vostede Psyops in LMAX, and it uses the same liner. You got the steel liner lock that instead of pushing like this, it uses a through-way button that pushes that out of the way and allows it to close. So one of the benefits that you get over a traditional button lock is you've got an actual liner lock providing not just the stability of the lockup, but a really measurable, feelable, comfortable detent. And this knife, guys, I've only done an unboxing and first impressions, but all I can say is wow. Fantastic knife. I've always loved the Smock, but these aren't truly button locks. They're more of a top liner lock, or that's what I'm going to call them at least. So as we move on, we are going to look at a couple of, I guess you would call it, technological updates to the standard Backlock. And we won't spend a lot of time with these, but this is the cold steel Triad Lock. The cold steel Triad Lock, like on this 4MAX, operates very similarly to a Backlock. And when you have these open, they look like traditional Backlocks. The difference is in the way that this spring engages. So when I push this up, you can probably see light coming through here because this is more designed like a hammer than just a spring that rests on the back side of the blade. So you'll notice you've got this little channel here that when I push this up, and you've got this bar that has a little ball or a little curve on the front that comes into the blade here. But when you close this knife and it locks up, it is locked up not only on the flat of the blade, but it's got a little divot coming in right here. And it really provides what the industry argues is one of the strongest locks in the game. You'll notice the same thing on the 4MAX. You've got this traditional looking backlock, but it has, if I had this knife apart, you would see that it's almost got like a piano hammer shaped piece that when the blade is deployed, it falls literally down into it, and it's got a couple of different contact points. And they've tested these under tons of weight. Not to mention that they're also very thick, but I think in terms of strength and hard use, if you're not going to use a fixed blade, this is probably the most stable, sturdy, I'm going to go beat the hell out of stuff lock, right? And then from there, we've got kind of a unique, from the same mind, Andrew Demco of Cold Steel, now of Demco Knives, who designed and came up with the Triad Lock, then came out with the 8015, which employs the Scorpion Lock. Guys, the Scorpion Lock is a love it or hate it kind of thing. And for me, this knife is one of my love-its. I sent it out to Satu for a regrind because I love the knife that much. I've got titanium scales coming in for it because I love the knife that much. You've got this back bar that's under tension. This is aluminum. This is G10. Will soon be titanium. So literally, this place right here has tension in the spring. So when I pull that back, it takes a little bit of effort. But then the blade will fall shut and the bar go back on the lock. So when I go to open it, you'll notice that it's pushing along the stop pin here all the way around till it comes to this lockup. Bar falls in place. I go to grip the knife. I'm also putting pressure into this lockup. And I'm convinced that this lock is probably stronger than the Triad Lock. People tell me I'm wrong, but I think this knife is absolutely ingenious. It's a fidgeter's dream once you get used to the way that it deploys, where you've kind of got to release the pressure on the front side of the bar so that you're not increasing the pressure, making it too stiff to deploy. But just a fantastic, unique, really innovative locking system. And it's only available, to my knowledge, on either a Demco 8015 or a Cold Steel 8015. The good news is you can still find these Cold Steel 8015s at a pretty reasonable price in S35VN. And I think they even make this now in a light, which is a little bit less expensive. So moving on, we're going to come to originally the Benchmade Axis Lock, which is a revolutionary, or at its time was a revolutionary lock that uses axis, or what are the springs called? Axis springs. And then the patent ran out and other companies started doing it. Everybody makes an axis lock knife now. One of the things that has not been my favorite about axis locks is that for the longest time, they didn't have the greatest detent, but they really don't need it, because when you pull this bar back, you can literally flip the knife out, flip the knife closed. Thumb studs work great. Some knives work better than others. I personally think from a modern bar style lock, the Vosti Dachshund is snappy and as good as they get. That's why I wanted to have these two knives out here. But when we look at how an axis lock or a bar lock works, you've got, of course, this bar right here, and you've got a stop pin right here. So when I pull this bar back, what it in essence does is it releases that blade. So that blade comes around, and the bar lock locks in right here, and the stop pin is pushing pressure against the front of the blade, and this is pushing pressure, locking the blade down. So bar locks are some of the more strong, resilient locks in the EDC game. This one's a little bit different because it utilizes the stop pin and the bar lock together, which I think is ingenious, and it's got this little nub here that catches the actual axis bar. So when this thing goes together, I feel like it's even got more contact area than the Benchmade axis lock. But I've got bar style locks on several different knives. I could have made this video 3 hours long going through different locks, but I just tried to keep it kind of to differentiate the lock. So this is what we're going to call the bar lock. Started out with the axis lock. I think it's a great lock. It's not one of my favorites right now just because I like a more traditional detent knife, but that doesn't take anything away from the fact that they're fantastic locks and fantastic knives. So going on, we're going to come to a Spyderco up till just a little while ago was, or still may be a thing. I don't know if the compression lock's still protected, but this is a lock that Spyderco came up with, and OCD for EDC came up with a way to make it better by putting a little CME, compression made easy, a little pin here. I've always been used to compression locks because Spyderco Paramilitary 2 was one of the first knives I owned. And really, whoops, I just slammed the tip down into that. But really got used to using the compression lock So I don't feel like I necessarily need a compression made easy, but I could definitely understand how if you were a lefty, it would be a huge help. And I know Rob's Nerdy Knives loves his, but the compression lock is basically operating under the same pretense as a liner lock, but it's using, instead of actuating it from underneath here, you have a more ergonomical grip, and you just simply, as I drop these two knives, I'm determined just to wear out the Spyderco tonight, right guys? But you can simply open it, it locks up like a liner lock, like a champ, and then you just simply pull it back there on that little tab, or with the compression made easy, and the knife falls shut or shuts, right? So that is the Spyderco compression lock. And I'll probably leave out some locks here, guys, because I know I don't have the new lock from Triad, that, or some of those pivot locks. But I think I've got a bunch here. So let's look at a couple of locks that are similar in these two knives. These two knives use the Demco Shark Lock. This is the another Andrew Demco innovation, a lock that I really like. It's another lock that doesn't have a lot of natural detent, but in my opinion, it doesn't need it because it's just so nimble. And it's this little lock right here. Basically pulls back, slides forward into that tang. So it's basically pulling back and up. The first company that they licensed the Shark Lock to was the Flytanium Arcade. And I basically think that Flytanium has put out the best Shark Lock outside of a American-made 80/20 offering in the game. I love this lock. A lot of people don't like it. A lot of people find it too sharp for the fingers. A lot of people hate the detent. I can actually, as I fail it there, I'm not a big thumb flipper guy, but from a reverse finger flick, I can do a really good job. And on my 80/20.5s, I've done a magnet mod that brother, God, I'm drawing a blank. I'll come up with it in a second and throw it out there. But yeah, learned how to do a magnet mod, was sent out some really good magnets, and it does give it a little bit more of that, what feels like detent. But the Shark Cub, I don't know if it's just the size or the fact that it's got this hole in the Skinner blade. I have no problem deploying this. The Arcade feels snappy in its own right because it has thumb studs. But the Demco Shark Lock is a fidgety, stable, very innovative lock. I love it. I'm a huge fan. Before the Shark Lock, there was a lock that I wasn't necessarily aware of, the Snex lock. And this lock looks very similar to a Shark Lock because you pull on this top here and the blade falls down. I'm glad I have both representations here because this is the VV Vision FG. This is the Shark Lock that I can pull back. You can see this little ball here where the lock up is. And in the Shark Lock, you've got a spring right inside here. The Snex has a spring back here in the back. So these knives, even though the top looks similar, they're in no way a copy or a similar really design on a lock. They're totally different. And when you get the Wii version, the Vision FG, they've got it where you can actually pull out to do some maintenance this lock here, which is really helpful to show because this one looks exactly the same. So basically what you have is you've got this blade that's got this little cutout in it, and then you've got this on a spring. You can see the spring back there. That when I pull that back, it falls right into that little notch. So I don't know if you can see that. I think you can see it locking up. So when it locks up, it's absolutely a vault. I've got a hair in there, which is going to drive me crazy, but I'm not going to look at it. But right here in the Civivi, you can see the same thing. Even though I can't pull this all the way out, you can see when I pull that bar back, it's actually coming out of this. So it's got full penetration and contact right there, and it's just an awesome lock. Very fidgety, like the Shark Lock, but this is the Snex, and I'm saying it wrong. What kind of lock is it? Super Lock. I think it's called the Super Lock. This is the Vision R, and this is the Civivi Vision FG. This is every bit as good of a knife as this, and this one will save you about 180 bucks. So moving on, we're going to come to a basic liner lock. So I looked at a couple of different liner locks. We looked at, in the beginning of the video, the OG GEC type of liner lock, and then we've seen some button actuated liner locks. But these two guys here are just traditional liner locks. This is the A100 Mini from Emerson Knives, and this is the Devo Knives Buzz from Devo Knives, of course. And when you look at this, which has got crud on it, I've really got to get better at cleaning the shit off my blades. All right. So this guy, the liner locks up at the bottom instead of at the top, but it provides a very strong lockup, and it doesn't give you any limitations by being right-handed or left-handed, because you're not putting pressure on a lock bar when we get to the Chris Reeves integral lock, aka frame lock. But a liner lock, whether it's more of a simple liner lock like in the Mini A100, or an integrated lock in a titanium knife like in the Devo Buzz, to me it's a fantastic locking system. Works very well, allows for great detent, and allows for fantastic action. So I'm a huge fan in the liner lock. It's probably one of my favorite lock types, and these are just two representations of it. So we will keep on keeping on, guys, and we will come to what I consider to be either a concealed frame lock or bolster lock. And some of you guys let me know in the comments if these are different. I know this is a bolster lock. I know this has been called a bolster lock or a frame lock. The way I look at it is it's basically a frame lock, but it's got a scale covering the part of the frame that your hand, when we look at the frame locks, the Chris Reeve integral locks, come into contact with. So you basically have the entire scale as part of the structural frame that's locking the knife up. So when I go to flip it, I can see it's about 50% engaged. I am putting pressure on the lock with my hand, not as much as a traditional frame lock, but just like with the Finch, which is also filthy. It's a steel frame lock, but it's the same general purpose. You've got your lock up here, but then this is part of the structural scale. Push it out of the way and the frame closes it. But it's concealed behind that micarta scale, and here it's concealed behind the carbon fiber scale. So this is what I call i.e. bolster lock, or i.e. concealed frame lock. So guys, we're getting close to the locks that I can have representations of. So now I want to bring in, and these are manuals, these are not automatics, so that should be a distinction. Now these are a couple of frame locks. I don't have a Chris Reeves here, but Chris Reeves, if I'm not mistaken, according to Wikipedia, the Chris Reeves integral lock was the first frame lock, which basically, instead of using a liner or a compression lock or a ball, you have the titanium or steel part of the knife, which is actually milled with a relief point, either on the inside or the outside of the clip side scale, that allows, when that knife is open, there's a detent ball in it, the lockup pulls in, lock bar pulls into the tang of the knife, and then when you grip it to let it rip, you're in essence putting more pressure on that lock bar. They're very stable locks. One of my favorite locks. A lot of people don't like them because if you do reverse flicks, and I have a hard time thumb flicking some of these knives, because your tendency is to want to put pressure on this lock bar, which in essence can keep the blade from deploying. So I've just gotten used to holding my hand loosely on the clip and on the pivot, or taking it off the pivot altogether and just giving it a little flick. But these are both frame locks. I had a lot I could have shown you, but these are just great representations of what I think is my favorite type of lock. And a lot of people won't agree with me there, but I just love them. I love the way they feel in my hand. They feel stable because I know I'm putting additional pressure on that lock. And I just think they're all done differently. I think they're elegant. I think it's part of the art of the knife to look at how it's cut out. That's just me though. So our final category in my shrinking collection is the button lock, guys. The plunge lock. The most controversial lock probably of locks, right? Everybody says they're failing, they're not strong. I agree with that. I took apart the Banish, the Kaiser Banish, and that's probably one of the strongest little plunge locks, and they're getting better every day. But if they're done right, guys, and if you use the knife with a little bit of care, to me, they are one of my favorite locking mechanisms. I love the fidgetability of them, and these just happen to be two fantastic ones. The Protect Mordax is snappy, is solid, does not fail. I've spine whacked it before on camera for you guys. I'm not going to spine whack these again. I'm getting out of the spine whacking game because it's not good for your knives as sport. And the Wii Mini Malice button lock. Both of these guys are snappy. They're finesse knives. They're both great cutters. They've got fantastic action. And there's something just really pleasurable about pushing that button and having that blade fall home. And just like with some of the other knives, I can push the button and flick it out if I don't want to use the flipper tab. Not that I'd ever do that. But guys, these are Javon's knife lock types. So we've got our button lock. We've got our frame lock. And these are going to be turned different just to kind of show the lock. And of course, the liner locks are not going to be turned any which way because it doesn't matter. You're not going to see them. We got our liner locks. We have got our bolster or concealed frame locks. We have got our Super Lock by Snex. We have got our Shark Lock by Demco. We have got our compression lock from our friends at Spyderco. We have got our axis lock, i.e. bar lock. We have got our Big Daddy Triad Lock, which I'm going to take out of the frame so we can look at some others. We have got our Big Daddy Scorpion Lock, one of my favorites, hard use locks. We have got our different ball locks, like the Manx here. And then we've got one of my new favorite locks and one of my new favorite knives that I'm experiencing that Brother A to Z's letting me check out. The top button actuated liner lock. I think it's an absolute winner. I think it's a great lock. And then of course we've got our OG Backlock, which even though it's old and it's been around a while, it works great. But guys, those are the locks representing my collection, right? Let me know which ones I've left out. I know I don't have any of the pivot activated ones, but I think most of them are here for manuals. Guys, it's been a long video. I hope you've enjoyed it. If you've stayed this long, thank you, thank you. I would ask if you're so inclined to hit the subscribe button and the bell notification icon, but more importantly, please look out for the guy or gal to your left. Please look out for the guy or gal to your right. Please look out for each other. Go forward with love in your heart, and always choose debate, not hate. Be up. Thanks, Joe Isabella. I love you all. Peace.